Hamstring pulls are going to happen. It's a sad reality of the situation, especially working in field sport athletes. Essentially, they happen when the hamstring muscle tendon complex is not able to withstand a specific impulse of force. So what does it need? Well, not rest and ice. I'll tell you that for free. It needs strength, robustness, work capacity, and exposure to high eccentric impulses. For a grade 1 or 2 strain, just using rest and ice and then return whenever they don't hurt anymore will make a 3-week problem stretch out into a 3-month problem. In this video, it will include our return to performance process for a grade 2 hamstring strain for Sammy, one of our defensive linemen, and how we were able to get him back to full sprint with no limitations in 2.5 weeks. There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. This is just our process, and I hope it helps. Our linear sprint progression begins with an acceleration and a constraints-based approach. We want to push the limit of the stress we're exposing the hamstring to without pain. The main constraints used to limit the impulse the hamstring gets exposed to are distance, speed through sleds, chains, and bands, and intent of the athlete combined with constant pain reported, i.e., hey, we'll do 50%, 5 yards, you go out, how did that feel? Good. All right, let's do 60%, how'd that feel? I felt a little tight. Okay, we go back to 50%, we hammer that on that day. As they progress, sled pushing turns to sled and chain toting, and distance increases, so the speed and the rate of impulse do as well. Acceleration posture also puts less eccentric strain on the hamstring, putting us in a position to be able to do a lot more work. We also want to repattern upright sprint posture because that was one of Sammy's big problems to begin with. So as acceleration turns to max V work, we want to be prepared to handle those shapes and do them correctly. Here you can see that through a resisted A series. To build work capacity and continue to work on his energy system development so he'll be ready for summer training when he gets back, we utilize the Derek Hansen 10x10. So we started with sub-maximal sprinting, it's 10 yards, 1-to-2 work-rest ratio. You do 10 reps, that's 100 yards. You take a minute rest and you can do as many sets, whatever your programming entails to get to that yardage. Throughout the return to play process, we're monitoring the total volume using GPS, and then we use sub-maximal drills, including all of our sled and chain work, to keep them on par with total yardage other people in their position group are experiencing throughout the summer. Lastly, we transition to builds and flies to touch high velocities using GPS. We want to see 90+% of Sammy's top previous speed, no pain reported, and we're good to go.
What we're gonna do right here is go back.
Football is a game of A cells and D cells, and deceleration is purely eccentric loading, and the hamstring plays a huge role in that process. So the same principles as before. You progress submaximal efforts to maximal based on pain reported, extensive to intensive in terms of the plyos, and short distance to long distance, ultimately exposing him to the same volumes that the guys in his position group are getting exposed to. So much like the work that we're doing out in the field, we want to progress the strengthening exercises of the post chain. We want to start with high force at low velocity, only what's tolerable based on their pain level. Here we have a couple yielding isometrics. We'll also do different angles and positions for overcoming isometrics as well. And then we'll get into exposing that hamstring to load through the entire range of motion at the hip and at the knee. I really like these hand-supported good mornings because you can overload the eccentric portion of the movement at the origin of the hamstring. And here you have the manual partner hamstring curls. It's the same concept, but at the knee. And you can control every single part of the range of motion. We'll start exposure to our core force building exercises first through limiting range of motion and load, progressing through that, and then regressing based on pain reporting. Same concept as the box squat here for our unilateral strength building exercises. All we do is progress load, we progress range of motion. We'll start to take those ARX pads away as we go. Our primary KPI in the weight room will be force and asymmetry testing through the Nord board. We'll do that doing the 3-rep assessment of the Nordic hamstring curl, and we'll do the ISO 30 where we get that leg to similar position that they'll be in at full support during upright sprinting mechanics. Alternate side to side. We want that asymmetry to be less than 10% in that force to get close to what they had before the injury. So we got a floor of force built. There's some robustness in that tissue, and now it's time to expose that body to high impulses of force. Here we have split stance snap downs into depth drops. The progression will be similar: load, intent, and adding or taking away constraints to expose that body to higher impulses. And it's not a program if you don't do some cleaning. So, we've exposed the body to high force at low velocities, high velocities at low force. Now it's time to put them together into our Olympic derivatives. The progression is similar to before. We'll limit the range of motion with the blocks. Now Sammy's taking it all the way from the ground, doing a clean complex, exposing that hamstring to high velocities at high forces. And lastly, we have our finishing touches in terms of having high impulse accessories. Here we have a laying switch. This is my little brother Bubba getting after it, driving that heel into the box. Again, exposing that hamstring to high eccentric impulses of force. Here you got KB and Alexa absolutely crushing some partner push front lunges. These exercises are just the final touches in exposing the bodies to high impulses of force at high speeds that they might get exposed to on the field of play or on the court of play. These are our peaking exercises. This is to build the final last touches of robustness before they go back out there and play their sport. At the end of the day, it was a small setback for a major comeback for my man Sammy. He completely committed to the process, and after 2.5 weeks, he was completely back at full sprint with no limitations, ready to play ball and ready to get those juicy bicep pumps that he lives for.